Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have Dr. Michael Walmsley, who is from New Zealand and working in interfaith in the Hamilton and Auckland area, and we'll talk more about it as we go. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Now tell us where you're born and raised, and then we'll get to how you came to California for a few months.
Well, I'm born in New Zealand, a little town called Hamilton, which is about an hour and a half from Auckland. And I was raised there, went to school and went to university in Auckland. Came back and married a girl from Hamilton and wandered off to Australia for a few years. I was teaching at a university there and then made my way back to Hamilton and still live there.
And you have children, because I've met some of them.
Yep, we've had 8 children. They range in age from 7 all the way to 29. And they keep us real busy. We've got 6 grandchildren.
Are they in the area so you get to enjoy them? And
Quite a few of them are, yeah. I've got 2 that are on church missions at the moment, and 3 of them that are married that live nearby.
where are the children on the missions?
I've got one in South London, a place called Brighton at the moment, little town, seaside town in Brighton.
Good old Brighton Beach.
Yeah, she's enjoying herself as a missionary, and my other son is learning Russian at the moment, and he's going to the Ukraine. He was going to eastern Ukraine, but we've just heard that he's going to be relocated over to the western part of Ukraine. There's a little less trouble on the west compared to the east.
That's interesting that Mr. Putin's on the move there a little bit more, and that's for another day. Now, you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints all your life?
Yes, I am, yeah.
And your wife?
Yep, our parents coincidentally both joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1955. Mine joined in Brisbane, Australia, and my wife Fiona, her parents joined in New Zealand, and they were both school teachers, and they ended up teaching at the same high school. Our fathers did, and her father was one of my school teachers, and that's how we met.
Tell us about the necklace piece, will you please? Hold that up, the camera can get a good look.
This is known as a Maori bone carving. Maoris are the indigenous people of New Zealand, and my wife is part Maori, and my kids gave this to me for my birthday, and it's got a little inscription there, CTR, which stands for Choose the Right. So this is my kids reminding their dad to choose the right.
To do the right thing.
Yeah, and so I like to wear that as much as I can, and it sort of reminds me of my kids, but it also reminds me of my commitment to God to choose the right.
Now tell us about the interfaith work in Hamilton.
Well, in Hamilton we have an organisation known as the Waikato Interfaith Council, and we started in the late 1990s. Our local mayor was very supportive of the initiative. We saw that New Zealand was becoming a lot more multicultural, and in some cases that was not creating a lot of harmony in the community. There was misunderstanding there from people coming from different countries, and one way that we thought we could address that in Hamilton was to show greater understanding for our brothers and sisters that were coming from different countries, and they came with different religious backgrounds, different faiths, and you know, there's nothing like ignorance breeding suspicion and in some case disharmony.
Well said.
So we opened ourselves up to creating an organisation known as the Waikato Interfaith, and we invited people, representatives from a broad range of faith communities in our area. So we had representatives from the traditional Christian faiths, from the Catholics, from the Anglicans, Methodists, Presbyterians, and others. And then we also had strong representation from some of the Asian and Eastern religions. So in that case we had Hindu, we had Sikhs, we had Buddhist, we had Islam or Muslims, Hare Krishnas, just quite a broad range. And so, we're a group that's working hard to bind us together. I must also include our Jewish friends as well, because they've been an excellent group that sort of helped to make the interfaith work. So we've now been going for, 15, 16 years.
Isn't it interesting that when you don't know somebody, they're a little out of your viewfinder, and once you become close personal friends, you just have so much in common and are on the same paths and roads and all those other sorts of things. That just fascinates me all the time, because we're making new friends all the time.
Well, let me tell you a story that sort of highlights that. I went to an interfaith meeting. I'd been away for a few years and then got invited back. And there was a gentleman there in a white shirt, suit and tie. I found out he was a lawyer in town working for the government and sort of in family relations area. So I introduced myself and asked him what faith community he represented, and he said he was the Hare Krishna leader of the local Hare Krishna community. And I sort of sat back. He was...
You can't be dressed in a suit and tie, right?
Well, he was an Anglo-Saxon guy, and clean-shaven, short hair, and I immediately sort of bonded with the guy. And well, a few months later, one of our interfaith meetings was at the Hare Krishna temple, and he was our host. He welcomed us into the temple, and there he was in the traditional regalia that we're all accustomed to, sort of the orangey-coloured robes. And he had some paintings on his face, and he welcomed us and then explained some of the parts of the Hare Krishna faith and what the various figurines represented. And it was a wonderful meeting. And he explained it in what I call an Anglo-Saxon way, so it could relate to me a lot better. And we've been close friends ever since. And not that the orange uniform was a barrier, but it was surprising just to see.
But it was different.
It was different.
Right.
But once we sort of broke through that and I saw him for what he was, I've got a lot of love for that man and all the good work that he's doing.
If I tell people I'm a Mormon, almost instantly they'll say, oh, those are the boys in the white shirts and their badges riding on bikes.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll say, yes, that's part of the group,
Yeah.
Even though it's just a small little, flickering of it, it represents, the Mormon people. Now, you're in the United States for a few months studying, doing research, other things at UC Davis. Tell us a little bit about that. Let me say that you're a Fulbright scholar. That's impressive in all of our lives, and it's nice to be with somebody that bright. Tell us about your research.
Well, it's a real privilege to be here in Sacramento and in sort of this area. I had an opportunity to come here for 6 months to undertake research. Believe it or not, I'm actually studying the California dairy industry. Now, you might say, well, what can the New Zealand dairy industry learn from the California dairy industry? Well, coincidentally, your industry here is the largest dairy industry in the United States, of all the states, larger than Wisconsin. You produce about 17 billion litres of milk a year.
Wow.
But I'm proud to say that New Zealand is bigger than that. We produce 19 billion litres a year, and we're a big exporter. We export 95% of that milk, a whole range of products. And so I'm interested in how you're operating your dairy factories. And one of the questions that I'm trying to answer is, how are we going to run our dairy factories off renewable energy into the future? When we run out of coal and gas and oil, what are the alternative ways that we can still produce food for our people and for the world using renewable energy?
Does California cheese taste different than New Zealand cheese?
It sure does. I don't know if you sort of put it through extra processing steps that it turns into rubber, but it just seems a lot more rubbery to me and not quite as tasty.
And that's what we've grown up with. It's rubbery. You can bounce it if you needed to every now and again. Nothing more pastoral than a pasture with cows.
Yeah.
And I grew up milking in a little farm town, and I thought cows were the dumbest I just couldn't imagine an animal on earth was dumber than a cow. But every morning and every night they had to be milked, and the milk and the dairy product was used, and a lot of it was shipped out. It was part of the livelihood. My grandfather had he milked 40 cows morning and night, and that's sort of what he lived off of. So we hayed and irrigated and all those other things so the cows could feed and pasture. Then once I left that, went off to the military and college and all those other things, looking back, I thought, wow, I lived in a pretty pastoral setting, life was pretty good. What will you do with your research? I mean, you present a paper to somebody, or you just write up your notes? What will you do with your findings?
Yeah, disseminating the research results are really quite important. So the goal is to present at international conferences and to write papers. So one of the areas of work that I'm focusing on is also the challenge with renewables is they're not quite as easy to produce the energy you need from them as just burning a lump of coal or burning oil in a car. And so there's a concept known as energy return on energy invested.
Yeah.
So how much energy and work and effort do you need to put in to build the infrastructure and the systems so you can actually capture the energy from renewable sources? So you may have noticed that to capture the energy from the sun requires a fair bit of effort. You've got to have large solar panels, lots of area, and there's a lot of cost and energy that has to be expended in order to get the energy from the sun. Similarly for wind, tidal energy is similar to that. So there's a lot more investment up front that's required. There isn't it's not as easy as just harvesting the fossil fuels. And so part of my work is looking at some of the economics of that, and how much energy and money are we going to have to invest over the next 50 years to ensure that we maintain the same standard of living. And we're going to have to be very wise in how we invest that money and what energy sources we go after, because some of the energy sources are going to cost us so much money, and the amount that we get back from them it's just not worth the investment. So we've got to be clever in how we invest our energy resources to get the energy back that we need.
Now, we can put on more coats and quilts to stay warm if it gets a little cool, or we can undress a little more if it's too hot and all those other things. But we do have to have food and water, particularly water, to get by. Is there enough on the planet to see us through? And 50 years from now, if we're not quite as warm or not quite as cool as we wish we were, will we still be okay?
Well, throughout the world, there's no question that the amount of sunlight we receive and the amount of water that falls on the planet is considerable. But we have to be better stewards. We've got to be much better stewards of the resources.
Glad to hear you say that.
And there are some countries that do not have the same level of resources that we have in New Zealand, that you have here in the United States. And, for those countries, it can be a real challenge. And this is where international relations is very important. And we talk about sort of the Christian lifestyle at the individual level. There's also sort of a godly lifestyle and manner at the national level. And, when our leaders reach out and care for other nations, that becomes a very important part of having a peaceful world. And when you start looking at the resources of water and of sunlight and minerals and other riches that the earth has, in many cases, not all countries are blessed with the same level of resources. And so it is left to the people and the leaders to be willing to share with countries that do not have the same level of resources.
And should we be teaching this in our churches and our congregations, or is this more it's the civic duty of, the town leaders or the county leaders to teach us and instruct us?
Well, I think when it comes to global affairs, there's no harm in sharing some of those macro sort of pictures to help our people understand that where we as a nation have enough and to spare, that to give generously and to enable what we have to be shared with the rest of the world is a very important message. And you know, the Western world has been blessed immensely, and we've got to do all we can to share that with others. And you know, the missionary efforts of the church that I belong to is about sharing, and it's sharing knowledge, it's sharing the understanding of God, but it's also providing opportunities for people all throughout the world to become educated so they can be better stewards of what is available to them, and that they can, in a sense, be creators in their own right. Because, you know, part of being a good steward, I'm an engineer, and engineers, you know, one of the messages I share with my students is engineers try to do for $1 what any fool can do for 10. And you know, there's many places in the world that have impure water, not because they couldn't purify it, but they aren't getting themselves organised enough and may not even have the knowledge of how to go about purifying what they have in a very simple manner. So they can have pure water, drinking water, potable water, and the septic systems to treat the waste. And some of those skills have been lost from communities. You know, if someone isn't clearing out our rubbish, we don't know what's going on. You know, we've sort of lost some of those basic skills, and that's also been lost out in some of those rural communities around the world.
I have a childhood friend that I've stayed in touch with all these years, and her husband are on a mission in Kenya right now. And he made his living as a plumber all of his life. And just in an American town, just, you know, being a plumber and putting new toilets and sinks and things in, all that stuff. They're there for 18 months, and their assignment is to try to clean up wells. And so she sends these photos home. And the well will be a hole that they've dug in the ground that might be 10 feet in diameter, and maybe they found water 15 feet down. But it's not capped, it's not covered, it's not anything. It's just the hole sitting there. And the daughters come out of the village and dip their buckets in, you know, and they take it back, and that's what they cook with. And she showed a picture. They've got this little makeshift shower, and a bucket's put up there, and you pull on the little rope to dump a little water once you've lathered up and all those things. Well, so with a combination of 3 or 4 different charities from 3 or 4 different churches, they're capping these wells and putting in a pump and putting a little pump house and a generator that's being run off of solar panels and all of those sorts of things. And now they can just go over and turn on the spigot, and the water runs there, and the pump's got a filtering system and all that other thing, and the water is all of a sudden a different color than they've ever seen before, and all of those other sort of things. And it's not too expensive, I don't think. I mean, it does cost, resources are involved, but it's pretty simple. Can you just turn that hole in the ground into something that, you know, will translate to a spigot over there, away we go. Well, the people are having wonderful times. And she showed us a couple pictures of a little village. A woman's sort of got her hut there, and out in front it's swept immaculate, Michael. It's just swept beautiful, like we would manicure our front lawn. And then she's got 3 or 4 flower pots, and they've got pretty flowers going in them. But there's only enough water and only enough time in the day to go dig out of the well and all that stuff to just water those 3 or 4 pots, take care of the shower, have enough water to cook with. So time's a big thing. You know, it takes an hour to send Missy out there with 2 buckets to get full of water, and she comes in the daytime, she's got to do it again at night. And it's time consuming. And we smiled, we just walked to the sink and turn on the tap or turn on the shower or whatever else. So renewable energy in just a simple way, just making it simple, seems awfully important to me.
Yeah.
Now, tell me what you're doing in your church. What are you teaching or administrating, or what are you doing?
I mean, I've done a whole lot of things. I've sort of been a youth leader from time to time, looking after sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old young men. And, you know, that was a wonderful opportunity. You know, I teach them on Sunday, would run sort of a midweek youth program with the young men. And I can remember one time running a financial planning evening with these young men. And I've got 4 daughters and 4 sons, and so I was sort of able to share some things with them. But anyway, as I was sort of sharing my financial planning with these young guys, you know, one of the messages I gave was that, you know, how well they plan, you know, for their future lives, that's the sort of, nice young lady they'll be able to get if they sort of don't do any planning and never get round to sort of taking responsibility to start saving and have some financial goals. Then, no young lady's going to take a risk on them. And it was surprising, with these young men, we were also talking about encouraging to save up money to go on a mission to a foreign country. And I sort of said to them, look, if you can save up for your mission, I promise you that will teach you the skills so you can save up for a house one day. And you can then save up to provide for your family and financially provide. And anyway, I thought none of those young men were listening. And a few years later, a young guy just got back from his mission, came over and knocked on my door, and he lived some distance away. So he went out of his way to come back and see me. And he says, Brother Walmsley, that's what they used to call me. He said, I just want you to know that I just got back from my mission and I saved for every penny. And
that's impressive.
And he says, I listened to that lesson you gave. And that young man's now at medical school, and he's a part Maori boy, and he's sort of doing his best to set a good example for the rest of his community. And so I was really proud of him, and we hugged, and he keeps in touch.
And you served a mission?
I did. Served a mission in Ireland. That was a wonderful experience. You might think, what's an LDS or a Mormon missionary doing in Ireland with all the Catholics? We had just a wonderful time preaching the gospel there with Catholic folks, and there were a number of priests that became good friends with. While I was on my mission there, we were based in Dublin. The northern part of Ireland was actually part of a different mission, but while I was there, it joined with our part of the mission. So we sort of had the Protestant part up north, and then we had the Catholic part in the south. And I had the opportunity to go up into Belfast, and the troubles that were there from the 70s were subsiding, but it was still a real eye-opener to see that how religious faiths, if they focus too much on their differences, could create animosity and suspicion, and all sorts of harmful things could come out of that. And that experience really taught me that with our faiths, we do have differences, but there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I feel that if we're willing to focus on the things that unite us, we can do great things to bless the human family.
I've noticed in Greater Sacramento that where we focus on similarities, everything gets easier. Mm-hmm. And the great similarity is that we're all children of God.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, where we're from, what our background, or what those things are. When we get to focusing on differences, people get testy and short-tempered and irritable. And I don't know whether that's human nature, but sometimes we can turn a meeting or a conference just on its ear by just saying, let's not worry about that and let's get to the similarities, and all of a sudden everybody's happy with where we're similar and what we're all trying to do the same way. What do you take from a mission? If a boy goes to Ireland for 2 years and he comes back, what do you take from that?
Well, serving a mission as a young 19, 20-year-old guy is just a wonderful opportunity to put God first. As a 19, 20-year-old guy, the last thing normally you're thinking about is putting yourself second and thinking of God. You're just wanting to go out and do all sorts of other things. So I think for me it was a wonderful opportunity to put God first and really get to know people, God's children. We were out there in the rough part of town. There were unemployed people, there were kids that were getting abused, there were broken families, and just to be a part of that and to share the gospel of Jesus Christ to those people. And for those that embraced it and increased their faith in God, and to see how they could, change their circumstances over time, through the love and the Spirit of God in their lives, was just a big testimony builder for me. And I was able to see that, I lived in a privileged situation. My parents loved each other, had good jobs, and so, we didn't want for anything. And so in some cases, you sort of look at folks over there that are less fortunate as, they caused it all themselves. But, when you go on a mission and you get to meet and see people, you realise that, that's not the case. In many cases, unfortunate circumstances led to that. And so just to be a part of helping people to change completely changes your life. You come back older, more mature, and, you become a little less selfish.
We had sons go on missions, and we felt like the boy that went away never came back. A different young man, and came back and grown and matured and all of those other sorts of things. Now, how much longer will you be here in the United States?
We're here till the 16th of August, but when I finish at UC Davis, we're going to do a little bit of travelling around. We've got friends in different parts of the United States. And then after we finish here, we're actually travelling over to Hungary.
And are you going to be in Budapest?
We're going to actually a little town called Veszprém. And, I've been to Hungary once. It's a lovely place. Looking forward to meeting the people of Eastern Europe.
We've traveled there ourselves. Well, we're at the end of the segment. Time flies, but if you could wave a magic wand to change or fix something in the world, what would it be for you?
Well, I would love to see our leaders of the world having just more love and compassion for one another and for the countries of the world. So when President Putin and President Obama are speaking to each other on the phone, that rather than countries going to war, that we can have leaders being able to work things out and be compassionate with one another.
There's a lot of difference between managing and leading, isn't there?
You bet.
I'd like to see them lead. Thanks
Okay.
so much. Appreciate you being here, and wish you well, and I'll see you in New Zealand next year.
That'll be great.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks, John.